best strategies for blockchain success, key trends, and shared experience for building better blockchain value. Welcome today. In this session, BlockApps will be presenting a panel discussion on key decision factors for a successful enterprise blockchain implementation. We will be featuring two of our partners from Labris, Lachlan Feeney, CEO, and from Synaptiq, Steve Moats, Chief Architect. We will also be joined today by BlockApps' very own Victor Wong, Chief Product Officer. Today, the panel will focus on the following themes: the current trends in enterprise blockchain and the outlook on the market for 2022 and beyond, the considerations and decision-making factors in deciding a blockchain platform, the comparison of public, private, and hybrid blockchains, their use cases, and the pros and cons of each. And we will also have a discussion on BlockApps' core platform, Strato, the implementation for client projects, and contributing platform features for customer success. My name is Jeff Powell. I am VP of Sales at BlockApps, and very happy to be here with you today. So without further ado, let's go in and meet our panelists. We're going to start with Lachlan Feeney, the founder and chief executive officer at Labris. Labris is Australia's leading provider of integrated services and blockchain development. Labris is a partner of BlockApps, and the two companies are currently developing a distributed project and invoice management ledger for a major integrated services company headquartered in Australia. It's a very exciting project, and we're all really happy to be doing it. So, Lachlan, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm great, Jeff. Good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and Labris and what you're doing with blockchain.
Sure. So yeah, as you mentioned, my name's Lachlan Feeney. I'm managing director and founder of Labris. Essentially, what we do at Labris is we work with companies, governments, startups, enterprise, basically organizations of all different shapes and sizes. And we work with them to implement and accelerate the adoption of blockchain technology. So we cover the entire software development and information systems lifecycle, with clients all the way from sort of product conceptualization, all the way through planning, design, architecture, implementation, and then ongoing support and beyond. So essentially what my company does, what Labris does, is we work with clients to create and build and innovate new and exciting blockchain technologies and get these, not just proof of concept solutions, but actual solutions into production. And I'm happy to talk about some of those solutions that we're working on with BlockApps and others throughout the call today. And I guess a little bit of background on myself as well. So I've been in the blockchain space for almost coming on a decade now. I've been involved in the space since sort of the early Bitcoin days, but my focus has always been on building solutions, on real world adoption. And that's sort of what excites me about blockchain, is getting real world use cases of the technology that can make companies, organizations, and lives of everyone more enjoyable and more efficient.
Thanks, Lachlan. We look forward to hearing more about it. Before I go over to Steve, I forgot to mention to everyone in attendance today that if you have any questions or thoughts that you'd like to share or ask, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. We have disabled the chat feature, so all questions should come through the Q&A button, which you should see at the menu on the bottom of your screen. Now let's turn to Steve Moats, Chief Architect at Synaptiq. Synaptiq is a leading business and technology solutions firm helping companies optimize business performance and improve operations through digital transformation. Synaptiq is also a partner of ours at BlockApps. And Steve, we're about to get started on a very exciting project that I guess I won't go into detail on because I don't want to jinx it since it hasn't actually started yet. But that aside, thanks for being here, Steve, and I'd like to hear more about yourself and Synaptiq.
Good morning and maybe good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be part of this discussion. As Jeff mentioned, Synaptiq is a business and technology solutions company, and I've been working for them now for about a year and a half. Synaptiq is involved in solutions and services for, as I said, business consulting, as well as technology solutions, whether that's custom solutions or partnering with SaaS platforms or implementing a hybrid kind of approach with cloud services as well as on-premise solutions. And my role there is chief architect, so helping with partnerships, technology partnerships and business partnerships there, as well as assisting with solution architecture and enterprise architecture with our clients. My role gets me involved in several different technologies and industries. Synaptiq is involved in the travel and transportation industry, as well as healthcare, public and private sector, as well as pharmaceutical distribution and supply chain, and a few other industries as well. Some background on me. Personally, I've been in the systems design and construction development industry or role for over 30 years. Before joining Synaptiq, I was at American Airlines for 18 years in various roles of technology around architecture, solution architecture, enterprise architecture, and was the chief architect there for the last several years I was at American. As Jeff mentioned, we are partnering with BlockApps on an exciting use case in the public sector around healthcare and foster care that has benefits or potential great benefits to the needs there in that industry. So I'm happy to be here and happy to be part of this discussion and helping focus on some of the technology aspects and decisions that go into embarking on a blockchain effort.
Thanks for that, Steve. And again, I do apologize for the misspelling of Synaptiq on our title slide there. Believe me, at BlockApps, we do actually know that it's spelled with a Q and not a C, because I've got all kinds of paperwork in front of me about this webinar where I've just been checking, and Synaptiq is spelled correctly every single time. So it's just an unfortunate error on our part.
That's all right.
But now let's turn to, as I said, BlockApps' very own co-founder and chief product officer, Victor Wong. Morning, Victor.
Morning. Hi, everyone. Yes, so first of all, I should say that I'm suffering from a little bit of a cold, so my voice is a little bit more hoarse than usual. As Jeff mentioned, I am founder and chief product officer at BlockApps, which means I oversee our strategic product roadmap of our blockchain product Strato, and client implementations where I get to work with great partners like Synaptiq and Labris on delivering value for their customers. In addition to my role at BlockApps, I'm also one of the founders of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, which is currently the world's largest open standards blockchain project. And I continue to serve on the board of that organization with companies like Microsoft, JP Morgan, Santander, just to name a few. Really excited to be here.
Thanks, Victor, and thanks for joining. And we do have some challenges with this multinational, multi-continental webinar we're doing today. And one of those is why Victor's video is not on, but we can hear you fine, Victor. And really, your voice does not sound that bad, so don't worry about it, regardless of how you may actually be feeling. But getting into the webinar, let's start with some questions. Really focusing on Lachlan and Steve. So let's start with Lachlan. Right now, in terms of blockchain, what key trends do you see impacting blockchain decision making in the marketplace? And what's really driving companies? What is the catalyst for companies to get started with blockchain? And Lachlan, we'll start with you on that question.
Sure. I think what we're starting to see is that particularly enterprise organizations are starting to wake up to the fact that blockchain is here to stay, it's not a fad, and that we're starting to see real sort of production use cases and interest in production use cases for blockchain come to light. We're also starting to see governments and regulators start to take blockchain a lot more seriously, and sort of blockchain industry specific regulations and policy making sort of come to light, which I think is really, really positive for the space to really move into that sort of productionization phase of the technology. So particularly for myself and my company, we're in the development space. We've done a lot of proof of concepts. We've done a lot of demo builds and playing around with blockchain technology and that sort of thing for various different companies. A lot of companies over the past few years have sort of dabbled in blockchain, but one of sort of the key trends that I see emerging at the moment that the public may not necessarily see yet, because it's still a little bit sort of behind closed doors at this stage, is that the technology is really starting to get taken seriously, and we're starting to see large major enterprise organizations implementing this technology, not just to try it, but actually into production. And there's a number of factors why we're there now. Policy making and regulatory clarity sort of becoming a bit more clear is certainly a big factor. Also maturing of the solutions and these sorts of things. But this is sort of what I see as the major sort of emerging trend for the next 12, 24 months, is actually seeing these systems come into production and actually seeing enterprise really start to adopt this technology and bring it sort of as a core technology component within their sort of existing information system architecture at these sort of large scale organizations.
So, thanks, Lachlan. That's interesting, and I have some follow up on that. But let's turn to Steve for a second. Steve, same question. What do you see? What do you see as the trends, impacting blockchain decision makers in the marketplace, and what's really the catalyst for companies getting started?
Sure. Yeah. In addition to what Lachlan said, just kind of the collaborative nature of business, and how you need to work together with partners and with suppliers and things like that, I think is driving people to look at blockchain as a viable solution, not just now, as a currency solution. And, the fact that there are large financial institutions and healthcare institutions and other organizations really focusing and investing in solutions with blockchain, I think is driving a lot of that. Synaptiq, wants to get in on that, and that's why we partnered with BlockApps. I think we see a number of practical applications as well for blockchain, and see the value that could be had there.
Thanks, Steve. Just sticking with that for a second. I mean, I know you've mentioned healthcare a couple of times, and financial services. I mean, why do you think that it is that blockchain is a better fit for some of these industries, or at least some of the projects in these industries?
It's to me, it's around the data. A lot of it's around the data, and folks that need to collaborate with the data, share data, and there's a lot of different entities, helping to maintain that data. And instead of just, implementing an integration solution, it's really a sharing and having multiple people, looking at that at the same time, as well as, managing that collaboratively. I think that's a lot of kind of the core of the use cases that we're seeing, instead of, a lot of different point-to-point integration applications. You have more of a collaborative data sharing, data management solution, and application to a lot of different use cases out there in those industries specifically.
Thanks for that, Steve. Victor, maybe I'll just go for you for a quick second. Maybe you could just say something from the BlockApps point of view about data privacy and sharing of data across multiple entities.
Yeah, I think Lachlan and Steve said it well. I mean, I think you can see the bigger trends are around collaboration and data sharing. And kind of layered on top of that is customers need to have greater transparency into the transactions and products that they're buying, kind of broadly. That's what we're seeing as a very, very large trend that's driving many, many use cases. And when you think about data, it's not just sharing of data, but it's also the ownership of data. Blockchain for the first time really provides a solution where you can share data with different parties without handing it over and letting that party kind of control you, basically. And we've seen, with the interest in kind of more the value that this data is providing, that's becoming a more and more important element to companies as they kind of think about through their blockchain strategy.
Thanks for that, Victor. Lachlan, going back to you, I mean, you mentioned, you referred to some of the use cases, thinking about use cases of blockchain. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about some of the use cases that you're using blockchain for, and how you really see blockchain transforming the way that business is conducted.
Yeah, so blockchain, like I guess I can talk about some of the use cases we're working on, but I think it's really important to understand that blockchain, and it's more about sort of the solutions that you find, and solutions within particular industries or problems within particular industries, as we've discussed, where collaboration of data is super important, where ownership of data is very important. But the solutions are sort of very, very wide ranging. Like what we're talking about here with blockchain is a transition from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. We're talking about basically user ownership of data rather than sort of data ownership by the applications that you're interacting with. So whenever I get asked the use case question, well, it's kind of like asking like what businesses are going to be on the internet, or what businesses are going to use the internet once it gets popularized. Well, the answer is everyone, essentially, across all industries and all verticals. Not every use case. Blockchain isn't a silver bullet, and there's certainly applications where blockchain doesn't make sense over existing sort of data sharing and storing solutions and these sorts of things. But it is very wide ranging in its applications. Now, with that being said, a lot of the use cases that we've worked on and that the industry has focused on today are things like financial services, supply chains, these sorts of areas. And I think the reason for that is not necessarily to say that that's the best and only use case of the technology, but is more a result of the way the technology is unfolded. So, blockchain sort of started with, in the very early days with Bitcoin. It was a financial sort of product. The industry has obviously come a long, long way since then. But because of those origins, there have been a lot of sort of financial services products. That's where a lot of the industry is sort of focused to date. We've certainly worked on a lot in that sector. Supply chains have started to become good use cases for blockchain as well. In 2021, we've seen the emergence of NFTs and sort of the adoption of blockchain technology for creative use cases, creative industries, these sorts of things. So I think what we're going to see as the technology sort of matures and we work out how to best utilize the technology across all of these different use cases, is we're going to see a much wider adoption of the technology across a broader sort of range of industry verticals and use cases. And I think the limits of how far that will go are fairly large.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, thanks for that, Lachlan. I mean, certainly, a lot of the projects that we work on at BlockApps are supply chain based, but not exclusively. And I mean, Steve, going over to you and thinking about use cases, and I don't want to limit you to talking about the project that Synaptiq and BlockApps are going to be working on in the healthcare space having to do with foster care. But I mean, that is an interesting use case because it potentially really transforms how that business is going to be conducted. So maybe you could speak a little bit about that use case and potentially other projects where you've looked at as a blockchain is a good use case for.
Sure. So yes, there's a lot of different factors that we're going into that particular use case, mostly around the data. And instead of the data seems to be today in the current situation, data seems to be passed around and kind of handed back and forth and duplicated multiple times. It's maintained in lots of different systems, but there are, as I said earlier, several entities that need to use that data or maintain that data almost at the same time. So in an effort, of efficiency, and also looking towards, the benefits coming out of what foster care and healthcare is trying to provide, where it's really focusing on the child or on the patient, making sure that they get the greatest care and they kind of get that 360 view of that foster child or that healthcare patient, where there's multiple contributors of the data for entities, hospital institutions, education, foster care families, the government institutions and agencies as well, all have a hand in that holistic picture, and being able to collaborate more with that data versus centralizing it in one or two systems and having to duplicate that in the other entities in some form or fashion, just helps make that process a lot more efficient, and lets folks focus really on kind of what the prime care is for the patient or the foster child.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, Steve, I'm one thing I'm curious about is, I mean, when you're working in this role, really as a consultant to organizations looking to go through a digital transformation, I mean, what's the process in, considering blockchain? I mean, is that something that typically you're introducing to the client or something that they're interested in? Just curious what the process is for deciding to look at blockchain as a solution and how involved your clients are in making that decision.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is driven obviously by the requirements what's needed, the existing landscape of the data and the systems, as well as kind of the business goals of the company and what's driving them to take such an effort on. Why are they looking at the situation? A lot of it also has to do with the characteristics of the data itself. As Victor mentioned earlier, as you can imagine, healthcare data, foster care data is very sensitive data. And so just being able to collaborate with that while putting the safeguards around it from a role-based access standpoint, who can see what, who can update what, those types of requirements, I think, really go into looking at what type of solution that you need. So typically it's driven by the requirements. The companies that we work with are looking kind of to us to kind of go through solution options with them, focusing on the requirements that are the most important, and for us to kind of make a recommendation, and then also partner with them to implement it. But normally it's our solution architects and myself that get involved in that conversation, along with the technology organizations that are our clients.
And have you found any clients resistant to the idea of adopting blockchain technology?
I think there's still, that the thought out there that it's not ready for prime time, and is that really a viable solution? Things like that. And we went through a little bit of that as when I worked at American Airlines. We did some that we had a kind of a blockchain working group, that there are several viable use cases there that I believe they're exploring now. But at that time, it was kind of really, do we want to focus on this right now or not? I think the effort of organizations and companies, like Labris and like Synaptiq, to help focus on, really the important requirements around why it is a viable solution and why it makes sense to use, and the benefits of its use.
Yeah, thanks for that. And so, Lachlan, over to you on the same topic. I mean, when you're working with a client, do they come to you just assuming it's going to be blockchain based, or is that a discussion? I mean, how does that work with you and your clients on various projects that you do?
So here at Labris, we're 100% blockchain focused. So we don't work on any projects if they don't involve blockchain. That's what we do day in, day out. So most of the clients already come to us wanting to implement blockchain solutions. Some of them have an idea of which solution that might be. Others are looking for us to recommend particular blockchain systems to them. But with that being said as well, like we, just because an organization is approaching us, or someone from an organization is approaching us wanting to implement blockchain technology, does not mean that everyone at that organization is on board with blockchain and bringing it and integrating it in with their business. So there's always challenges around that, around which blockchain solution we're going to implement, how we're going to implement it, how it's going to integrate with existing infrastructure at the organization. So there's always those sorts of challenges, but generally, because we are a blockchain studio, we're sort of fortunate that a lot of the business that comes to us, so at least the people that we deal with, are already mostly sold on the technology. It's just about how do we make it a reality for them.
Yeah, thanks for that. And yeah, I mean, maybe you talk a little bit more about that. I mean, when when decide, how do you decide, what's the appropriate blockchain solution? What's important to you? I mean, obviously, I know it's a case-by-case basis, but maybe you could flesh that out a little bit for us.
Sure. So this is a super complicated question, right? Because there's so many solutions out there. It does very much depend on the solutions and the requirements and these sorts of things. I guess first and foremost, when looking at which sort of blockchains solutions to use, you have to look at public blockchains versus private blockchains, permissioned blockchains versus permissionless blockchains. We can get into sort of the pros and cons of different solutions if you'd like. But generally, sort of what we find, particularly when we're dealing with enterprise organizations, there's still public blockchain systems, the likes of public Ethereum and these sorts of things, just aren't quite up to scratch when it comes to regulatory compliance and these sorts of things that still really, really scare off large enterprise organizations, governments, these sorts of things. There's a range of issues with the technology, particularly in the compliance department. I can get into the details if you'd like, that just sort of make these solutions not feasible for enterprise and larger organizations. So then we start looking at enterprise solutions and solutions that have been tailored and built out to deal with these compliance issues and still provide all of the benefits and efficiencies of existing blockchain solutions that are out there, but add more, bring more to the table. That's when we start looking at solutions like BlockApps that are sort of purpose-built for enterprise use cases that actually make it feasible for us to go into enterprise organizations, and when they start asking questions about what about this and what about that and how do you deal with this, well, the BlockApps solution has answers for those questions.
Thank you, and that's very well put, Lachlan. And Victor, you may not have much more to add than to what Lachlan has so eloquently stated. But Victor, maybe you could just talk a little bit about, for people who are not necessarily all that up to speed on the differences between public blockchain, private blockchain, and hybrid blockchains.
Yeah, so I think really, typically when we think about public blockchains, we think about cryptocurrencies and trustless blockchains. And the main challenge that they have is that anyone can join those networks, which is great. They grow very fast, they get large adoption. And if you have use cases where you're trying to reach a mass audience, that's a place for it, but it comes with some large compromises. You need cryptocurrencies to use them. You need to be able to be open to sharing all your data with anyone who joins the network. And as Lachlan eloquently said, that sort of puts a stop on most enterprise use cases right there, right? So then you really have private blockchains where private blockchains are typically, we also call them enterprise blockchains. They're permissioned. Not everyone is allowed to join the network. There are restrictions sometimes on what people are allowed to do. And there are different role-based access levels in different participants on who can see the data. This is typically where most clients want to be because they only want to share the data with the partners that are meant to see them, not everyone, even on the entire permission blockchain. And then you have the third kind of blockchain, the hybrid blockchain, which is really emerging as a kind of best of both worlds between the two, which is that you have all the benefits of private enterprise blockchains where you can control data, but you can also expose data in a public way and verifiable way to larger parts of the public. So think about like food labeling, for example, or sustainability verification. This is information where an end customer would like to see that information. But in this case, it effectively begins life as a private blockchain, but private permissioned players on that can open up the data to wider audiences if they want. However, those audiences can't write data to the blockchain. And that's the big difference between, you know, the three different types of blockchains, I would say.
Thanks, Victor. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Steve, going over to you. I mean, Synaptiq, which is not at this moment 100% blockchain based in all of the solutions it's providing. You know, maybe you could talk a little bit about, you know, when you're working with a client, and you know, either you think that blockchain is the best solution, and maybe they have to be talked into it, or they're on board. You know, what are the sort of particular challenges and risks that you see with someone adopting a blockchain solution for the first time?
Sure, I think a lot of it is the unknown factors. A big part of it, though, I think is what Lachlan mentioned a little while ago around compliance, especially around data and the sensitivity of the data. I think that's a big factor in it. I just, making sure that they are understanding of, the capabilities that is in the platform, any given platform. Again, as Lachlan was talking about earlier, there are many different platforms out there, and being able to have those capabilities, around traceability and around data compliance and data privacy, and fault tolerance and things like that may be built into that platform. Those are the things, depending on the use case and depending on the requirements, those are the things that you need to go over with the client and make sure that we understand, the level of importance in those different areas, and the risk factor of, not implementing with a solution that has those types of capabilities. I think a lot of it is just understanding and walking through the capabilities of a given platform and aligning that with the requirements from that client.
Thanks. And so when you're working with a client, say in that type of situation, on the client side, who ultimately is the decision maker? I mean, is it the person who's responsible for the project that's come to you, or does it sometimes kick up to a higher level at the organization? If a company has not adopted blockchain before and is going to through Synaptiq, who do you find is the ultimate decision maker in that regard on the client side?
Right. Yeah, I think and it depends on the size of the company a bit, and the structure of the organization within that company. Companies that have larger IT organizations, it's usually a senior member of that organization in IT that's making those decisions. When you introduce a new technology, a lot of companies have technology governance organizations where they need to vet that out and approve that as an organization within IT. Other companies, it's more around funding and what organization is going to fund that and accept that risk. Normally that needs to go in an organization like that. Normally that will go to a CEO or a CTO or CIO as well to get that approval.
Okay, thanks. Let me also just say right now, just reminding everybody who's attending the webinar, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. As we get down to the last few minutes of the webinar, Victor, just going to you for a second. Maybe you could quickly just talk about BlockApps and Strato and what Strato is, and then we'll go to Lachlan and Steve to talk about their experiences with it.
Sure. So Strato came out of our work on Ethereum before the launch of the Ethereum cryptocurrency, and we realized that Ethereum as a general could be used as a general purpose technology separate from cryptocurrency. And we built the Haskell implementation of Ethereum, and we really realized in kind of working with different clients and partners that there were certain key features that were missing from Ethereum technology that made it consumable by enterprises. And those three things, we like to call it the 3 Ps: permissioning, being able to control who is on the network, as I mentioned before, privacy, which is being able to decide on a per piece of data level who is allowed to see that, and then performance, being able to handle enterprise workloads of hundreds of transactions, even more per second. So Strato really, is based on that. So to be clear, Strato takes Ethereum technology, which is the widest used, most generally used blockchain smart contract technology out there, but it makes it usable for enterprise use cases. And the data you put on a Strato network doesn't require any kind of cryptocurrency or and doesn't share any data with the public blockchain networks.
Thanks, Victor. And Lachlan, going to you, because Labris has been using Strato for a while. Maybe you could just talk about your company's experience with it, and what do you think are the most relevant and useful features on Strato when addressing your clients' needs?
So the main project that we've been working with BlockApps on and using the Strato platform for is Labris is the main solutions provider, blockchain solutions provider for a company called Downer EDI here in Australia. They're a very, very large engineering sort of services firm. They do a lot of work within the mining industry, mining services, maintenance services, these sorts of things here in Australia. Mining obviously being a very large part of our economy here. So we've been working with them. We're on implementing a Strato solution to help them with basically managing tracking of labor and equipment on mining maintenance services work that they're doing across the country at the moment. And once again, it's all about, like, we're not just doing blockchain for the sake of doing blockchain. This is a business solution that is intended to solve business problems, improve efficiencies, cut costs, these sorts of things. And we've chosen blockchain because we believe that it is the best of the technology that can best sort of solve that business problem. So, and once again, this is a solution that is going into production. We've been working on it for a couple of years now. It's not a proof of concept. It is something that Downer will be using day to day. And I think that's a testament to BlockApps and the Strato platform, is that you can take a solution this large, and for an organization this large, all the way into production and have that working and have it as a core sort of day-to-day information system within the organization. Our experience with the Strato platform has been sort of, as I said before, we would not be able to implement the solution that we have implemented for Downer EDI if we were using a public blockchain solution such as Ethereum. Working with these, we're not working with startups here where approval processes can be made by sort of single decision makers. Decisions need to go through legal departments, IT departments, compliance departments. There's an enormous sort of approval process to sort of get through. And as I said, we've been working on this for a couple of years. So yeah, this solution just never would have got off the ground if we were using something like public Ethereum. So yeah, our experience with Strato is that it has enabled us to make these sort of large scale enterprise blockchain projects a reality, and get the sort of solution through these internal approval processes.
Thank you for that, Lachlan. That's very helpful. And I see that we're at time, but just one last question, which will go to you, Steve, for the last question. Where do you see enterprise blockchain adoption heading into 2022 and beyond?
Well, I just, as Lachlan said, there's more and more use cases being implemented. There's more examples of solutions that are out there in these different industries. I think that will help the adoption as larger companies build solutions on blockchain platforms. I think that will ease kind of the unknowns and the fears of other organizations going into this effort. And that, as they realize the capabilities that they look for in other types of systems and platforms are there in a blockchain platform as well, for some platforms around, compliance, around privacy, around fault tolerance and performance. So those things are there. It's just a matter of matching up the right platform with your requirements.
Thanks, Steve. And I see that actually we're past time. So thank you everybody for attending the webinar today. You can see on the screen our panelists' names and company websites if you want to follow up at all. I want to thank Lachlan Feeney, CEO of Labris, Steve Moats, Chief Architect at Synaptiq. I can see that we've corrected the spelling right there, Steve. So we were able to correct it on the fly. Thank you both very much for joining. Of course, both Labris and Synaptiq are partners of BlockApps. And want to thank Victor Wong, Chief Product Officer from BlockApps, for joining despite being sick. So I'm Jeff Powell, VP of Sales at BlockApps, thanking everyone for attending and hoping you have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.